I am Mike Lyons, your host for another oral history for the Jacksonville Broadcasters Association. The association's purpose is to preserve the rich history and contributions of the area's radio, television, and broadcasting industries. The association is open to those past and present broadcasters and those affiliated with the region's broadcasting industry and entities who have served this region's proud broadcasting heritage. We welcome students who are focusing their careers on the broadcasting industry. Our guest today is David Lamm, a longtime sports radio broadcaster here in Jacksonville, also spent many years doing television shows and hosting various TV sports shows. David, thanks for joining us today.
Well, you must have gone through a lot of broadcasters to finally get to me, but I appreciate the invitation. It's always nice to be invited anywhere.
Right.
Thank you.
A lot of my guests recently never intended to go into broadcasting, and that was the case with you because you started out in print. How did that end up?
Well, I didn't even start out in print. I did, but I was a high school kid. I was playing football, got a pretty severe leg injury. This little one-horse town, the local sports editor said, "Hey, would you keep stats for me at football games so I could sit on the bench, and keep stats?" Well, I must have done a decent job because then when we got to the fall, the winter, he said, "Would you come into the newspaper on Tuesday and Friday night and take phone calls from the county schools and write little 2 and 3 paragraph stories? Red Oak defeated Live Oak 40 to 38, and I must have done okay on that because then when we got towards the summer, he said, "Would you like to come in and work full time in the summer?" So next thing I know, I'm a newspaper man. Yeah. And I go to North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I had to put my way through school. Well, I'm saying, how can I make money? I go to the sports information office, and they hired me. I go in, I wind up writing feature stories on athletes from all the different cities. I can remember I would put different bylines. Because in those days, to be honest with you, newspapers would take some of these press releases and run them verbatim. And so what I would do is, if there was a player from Charlotte on the football team, I'd go interview him, write a little feature story on him, and I might put Joe Smith, Charlotte news correspondent or something. And I did that, for a good while. So anyway, that's how I got started.
And then you ended up coming to Jacksonville from another paper.
Right. Well, what I did was, our fraternity house, the Kappa Sig house when I was at Chapel Hill, burned to the ground. I don't mean it was on fire. It burned to the ground. I literally had to escape through a window. You imagine me jumping from a window to a tree, but the tree wasn't very far. But literally what I had was what I had on my back. And obviously I had to go back home. I had to get my clothes again. Well, that ended my Carolina career. Going back was such a pain. I had to go in debt to restock my wardrobe,
wow. Yeah.
Everything.
Huh.
And so I went to the local college, North Carolina Wesleyan. There I met my wonderful bride-to-be. Next thing you know, we're married. I'm going to school, but I'm also working full-time at the local paper, my hometown paper. And eventually, the paper down the road, Wilson, offered me the sports editor's job. Well, they were offering me a job that I would have tried to have gotten once I got my degree. This was a different time. You couldn't do that now.
Right.
But in those days, they hired me. All I know is 2 years later, I've got guys that I went to school with that got their degrees. They were calling me looking for work. So again, it was a different time. And I went from Wilson to High Point to Greensboro, and then eventually had a chance to come to Jacksonville. I knew Fred Seeley was in the managing editor.
Oh, yeah.
We were old Carolina buddies. And so I came down here
and you wrote for the paper in Jacksonville for about how long?
It was, 7, 8 years. Mm-hmm. I was executive sports editor, but in those days, that meant running the staff. It also meant writing the column. It also meant covering the big stories.
Your sports writing days came to an end at the time, Union, because
Yes.
they wanted to new management.
New management came in. To be honest with you, they fired me. They alleged that I had violated an ethics code which I found humorous because I am the one who suggested we have an ethics code because in those days newspapers were taking money under the table, and I mean it wasn't anything like it became.
And that was about 1983, I think you told me.
Yeah, it was 83 or 84. I'd covered the Super Bowl in Tampa, I think it was. And right after I got back, we had this big discussion.
And then you became a broadcaster.
Well,
how did that happen?
I didn't know what to do. I had interviews, I think it was Cincinnati, Portland, Fort Lauderdale. I was interested in those three cities for newspaper jobs. Channel 12 called almost immediately. Rock 105 called almost immediately. And I said, why not? I loved it here. I didn't want to move. My kids were young in school. This is where they were raised. So I said, well, I'll try it. So I went to Channel 12 and started doing a live show called Lamm at Large.
Yeah.
Good to see me. And then I went to Rock 105 and did sports updates. And one thing led to another. Then I went over to Sun Network, now Sunshine. It was Continental Cable. Then it got started. They wanted me to do a show that they could put on this new thing called Sunshine Network, sort of like the Virgin program, to see if programming like that would work. I guess it did. I did it on Sunshine for 13 years.
So you were on the ground floor of cable television and doing shows.
I believe when I went and started doing my cable show, I was the first one that was actually paid to do a show. Prior to that, they did the public access shows. And so I went and tried it. They paid me a pretty good salary.
That Lamm at Large reaction to that show was really unbelievable to you. I mean, you told me the Trace Armstrong story. I mean,
yeah, well, I go down to Florida for the media day one year, and they had a transfer from Arizona, Trace Armstrong, defensive end, was a wonderful player. I think he was an All-American. I know he played in the NFL for a number of years, became president of the Players Association.
Yeah.
Anyway, the very first day, we're out there on the field wandering around, looking and talking to players, and this big giant comes walking up and says, "You're Lamm at Large." And I went, "Yeah." Are you going to hit me? What have I said that you didn't like? And I said, "Who are you?" He said, "Trace Armstrong." I said, "Well, you just got here from Arizona. How do you know me?" He said, "Every Sunday when your show was on, the football team would gather in a big TV room, and we'd watch Lamm at Large. We loved him." So
that had to make you feel great.
Well, it made me feel great, but the biggest thing was the shock that people are watching this. and I had some inkling that it was going well around the state, because all of a sudden I'm getting calls from quarterback clubs and booster clubs all over the Southeast, pretty much, wanted me to come speak. Well, the only way they would know me would be through that cable show. And so anyway, it was quite wonderful. And, and I did that for a long, long time.
You think, hey, this has got to be unreal. How was the broadcast different than the print to you? How would you say the difference? What was the difference?
I'll be honest with you, it was a lot easier and a lot more pay. I mean, I was working about 2/3 as much and making about twice as much. I remember telling my wife, "Why the hell didn't I do this earlier?"
Broadcasting, let's go, baby.
They paid a lot better. But I never left the radio. I always felt like I needed both television and radio, because if one leaves, I got the other. And then in 1991, what was then known as CRJ, it's a country station. They had an AM that they held the license to, and all they did was just play music. They didn't even try to sell it. I guess they had a disc jockey who simply played the records, as we called them then.
You were doing radio at another place?
I was doing radio at CRJ.
Okay, right.
But this AM station was down the hall.
Right.
But CRJ made no effort to sell this AM.
Right.
They held on to it because they wanted to hold on to the license just in case.
And that, I believe, is when you told me Jay Solomon came to you about that time, right?
Right. Well, Jay Solomon came to me one day, and I got to know Jay and really loved the guy. So sweet, one of the sweetest men in the world.
Right. Wish we could have him for an oral history interview.
Right. But Jay came to me almost in tears.
He was great.
And I said, "Jay, what's going on?" And he said, "I can't find any radio station that'll do my talk show." Now he was the voice of the JU Dolphins and some other things, but he loved doing this 2-hour talk show, and I think it was only one day a week. And he went out and sold it. But anyway, nobody wanted it on, so I went to the general manager at our country station, and I said, we don't even use our AM for anything. Why don't we let Jay do his show there? He'll sell it, and he's not going to cost us anything, and hell, he may make a nickel for us. So Jay went over there. I agreed to help him, and there were 4 of us then. Buddy Martin, who was then the columnist for the TU. Frank Frangie was a young Gators beat writer, and we wanted to have Florida, a presence in Florida, because that was the big story when this was going on. And Jay and I, and we did that every afternoon from a sports bar in Mandarin. Well, it got more popular, and it was going pretty well. Well, the general manager at the country station finally came to me one day and said, we're thinking about taking that AM, going all sports, 24/7. Now, keep in mind, when we did this, there were only, I believe, 6 other all sports stations in America. It was a trend that was about to boom, but it hadn't boomed.
So you basically got sports radio started, full-time, 24 hours a day in Jacksonville because of your efforts and Jay's.
Well, I hosted the morning show on the first station. December the 9th, 1991, we went on the air. We had done no advertising, nothing, promotion, because they didn't want anybody else to see what we were doing. They wanted to keep it a secret from the other stations that we were changing formats. Well, they were also keeping it a secret from anybody who listened to the radio that we were doing it. And I literally went on the first morning at 6 o'clock. I can remember it. Good morning. This is Lamm at Large on WNCS or something. We had wins, 9:30 wins. We had one mic. When the producer got ready to talk, he and I would be cheek to cheek sometimes, but he would come on to throw it to breaks or something like that, and it just kept evolving. The next thing you know, there were sports stations popping up all around the country, and
what do you remember as the impact of sports radio in Jacksonville in those early times when you first started?
I guess one thing, it gave the fans a voice. Up until then, the only voice fans had was a letter to the editor, and and there weren't that many of them. What I found out very quickly is, and I knew this from sports bars and meetings and so forth, how many sports fans really wanted to let you know how passionate they were, how smart they were. So all of a sudden, as word spread that we were on the air, all of a sudden, in those days, we almost did totally callers. Lyons stayed jammed. Everybody had a comment.
And the ratings were really amazing, I guess. Were the ratings really good?
As I remember, they were okay, and maybe they were good. I don't remember what the ratings were. I just know that things were rocking pretty good, and sales started going up, and people started calling, and the afternoon show and the midday show, all of that they were doing pretty well. I know that the general manager of the old country station, she was sort of shocked that she had turned this just non-entity of an AM into a money-making AM. The owners with her, they were happy with her.
You had to feel proud, though, what you had started here.
At that point, pride really didn't come into it. I look back, I'm sort of proud that I was in on the ground floor of cable, the ground floor of 24/7 sports talk. So yeah, I take pride in that. But at that point, you've got a new toy. You're just out there rocking and rolling, and the more recognition you get, the more you realize the impact you're making. And at first it was almost impossible to get guest talk radio, sports radio. What's that? But then people they would come on, and I guess they got a lot of feedback. So they said, damn, had a lot of people listening.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, it was hard to get credentials at first. Sports radio, that's a fad. That'll never last. And only because of my newspaper background could I get credentials. All these sports information directors, they knew me from the newspaper So they said, well, okay, Dave.
We'll let Lamm come
Right.
back.
But had it been, some poor upstart, we wouldn't have gotten a credential.
Right.
We don't know you. We don't believe in sports radio. So I was able to get credentials. And I remember telling our bosses and owners, because shortly after that, of course, the Jaguars, the whole Jaguar thing came in '93 and the first season '95. I said, if we're not there, if we're not at these owners' meetings where the franchise will be given or not given, if we're not at these games on the road, it's going to send a message that we're not, quote, truly legit. Being there, I thought was important. And so we traveled the first 4 or 5 years. Well, by that point, trying to make yourself legit wasn't an issue anymore.
Right.
So we backed off a little bit.
So Jacksonville was in on the ground floor of that first 7 or 8 stations doing it. Jacksonville had one, and now it's crazy. It's everywhere. It's amazing.
Well, it boomed to well over 1,000 and maybe even more. There's actually, I think, a little bit of a decline, maybe not in the number, but when you get so many sports stations, particularly in the same market, then the revenue starts coming down for each. And so what a lot of stations, we have one here, my former station, basically went syndication. They got rid of local talent because local talent cost. Mm-hmm. Syndication didn't cost. So they could still sell it,
right.
Maybe not, but it didn't cost. So we're seeing that happen, more syndication in some bigger markets.
Mm-hmm. Now, you began a roundtable TV show in Orlando you got involved with.
Right, well, this was Sunshine.
Sunshine.
And we were at the end of the Lamm at Large run, and I knew it. And, and by
you still continued to do Lamm at Large while you were doing the radio at 9:30.
Yeah, for a fair, yeah, oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I always did radio and TV together. I never dropped one for the other. But as Lamm at Large, the TV show, Sunshine was then now going. They were buying team rights, Marlins and things like that, and they were altering the type of programming they wanted, and so the Lamm at Large thing was getting pushed a little lower. So they came to me and said, "How about we do a roundtable discussion?" Remember the old sports reporters on ESPN?
You right? Yeah.
I can tell you a story about that. But anyway, Mike Bianchi was in Orlando then. Joe Zagacki, the voice of the Miami Hurricanes, and me, sort of get it South Florida, Central Florida, North Florida. And then they had one of the local talking heads MC it a little bit. We did that at the Universal Studios, I don't know, 5, 6 years.
Was that a live show?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, Monday, when I got off the air Monday on the radio, I drove to Orlando. I would check into a hotel. Sometimes I played golf. Sometimes I went to a movie. Sometimes I slept all afternoon. Got up, showered, went to Universal, did the television show. Bianchi or I would go out and get a burger or something afterwards, have a beer. Then I'd go back to the hotel. I would have a call up at 3:30. They would call me at 3:30. I would get up, get dressed. I was in my car and out the door probably before 4 o'clock, and I would pull into the radio station Tuesday morning about 6 o'clock when I went on the air.
Yeah.
I'd come up the steps. I didn't even huff and puff after coming up steps then.
That took some work to do that, but you must have really enjoyed that.
Well, I did enjoy it. It paid well, and it really wasn't that much work.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm the luckiest guy on the face of the earth. I never planned for this, but I've had a wonderful career. I've spent my life covering sports, talking about sports, writing sports. I've been to multiple Super Bowls and World Series and Final Fours and U.S. Opens and Masters, and I've traveled places, certainly this country, that I would never have traveled to. Normally, most people don't.
Right.
Not only was I traveling to all these wonderful places, Pebble Beach, but somebody was paying for it. That was pretty incredible. So when I look back on it, I'm going, you lucky son of a gun. How many people fall into something and it turns out to be the love of their life. They didn't even know it at the time. And then they get this next March will be my 59th year since my first byline.
Wow.
I was in high school, but I remember getting assigned to go to an event, and it was a basketball tournament in Middlesex, North Carolina. I was so proud. I covered the games. I went back, and wrote the story up, and it was such a wonderful feeling. But that was 58 and a half years ago.
Yeah. 59 years of covering sports. I'm envious. You lucky dog.
And I tell people, and one reason I don't complain, listen, there's no doubt after you do anything enough, sometimes you don't want to do it. And I can remember saying, oh boy, do I have to go to another, ACC basketball game? I don't feel like traveling, I just didn't want to do it. But I did it. It didn't happen often.
Right.
But I wasn't going to tell somebody, they're making me go to the Wake Forest-Clemson game. Because most people say, really? You lucky dog? So you just don't say that.
Right. Now,
but I've loved it. I've been
right.
lucky, except for those idiots that keep running red lights and
right.
T-boning me. But that's another story.
Right. So that was the station you were at first on. That was 9:30 a.m. Correct? Was that
Yes.
9:30? Now you're currently, as we tape this, in October of 2019. You're at 1010XL.
Right.
And how did 1010XL come about? And of course 1010 I guess did even more when it began, even more sports programming local than the other one. How did that come about?
Yeah, when 1010 started, it really did it the right way. From the outside looking in, I couldn't believe that they had so many people on staff and they were doing so many things. I'm thinking, where's the money coming from? Because 9:30 always was sort of we didn't spend a lot of money. We finally got somebody in the mornings with me, but we didn't do a lot of promotion, and it's just hard to. Our producers were part-time. Well, 9:30 finally in 2010, they decided to go syndication. No doubt 1010 had cut into our audience a little bit, and they decided to go syndication. So instead of paying me a reasonable salary, they didn't have to pay anything.
Right. So 1010 was already going while you were still at 9:30.
Right, and I think they were doing well. I mean, I never have been one to look at ratings.
Right.
But I mean, they were doing fine, and we weren't. We seemed to be doing okay. But anyway, so when that happened, 1010 called, said they would like to find a spot for me. I said sure. After I did a non-compete for whatever it was, 6 months or something.
Right.
I went over there and we tried various things, being part of a midday show. The bottom line was, by this point, my physical back issues were really taking a toll, and it was hard to be as enthusiastic and as good as I wanted. And the midday show didn't pan out as well as we'd hoped. Some personality conflicts, blah, blah. So eventually they dropped that, and they kept me on. You remember 60 Minutes when Andy Rooney was there?
Yeah.
I'm Andy Rooney of 1010. I'm the old codger that comes on and goes, I'll tell you one thing right now. Fire the son of a gunner.
The Lamb rant.
Yeah, do you ever wonder why footballs are the color they are? Are footballs really pigskins? I don't know. I don't think so. So my role is to do a daily rant, and occasionally they use me to come in as a guest, for a segment on the other shows. During the players, I've covered every players that's been played at Jacksonville, except for the very first one in Sawgrass. So they use me as to come in and give them some golf. Because I have more golf knowledge than they do. And
I've listened to you since day one. I'm going to tell you, for me, you're missed. I enjoy watching.
Well, that's very kind of you. I remember one time talking to the general manager, and I was unhappy that all of a sudden I wasn't being used as much as I thought I should be and wanted to. But I had to admit, I said, I hate to admit this, station's doing damn well without me. I understand that. And so you're doing so well. There's no reason to listen to me moan, but I just wanted to get it on the record. But you know, they say they've done very well, and they've got a lot of good people in administration and in sales and production as well as on the air.
The popularity of sports radio, maybe we touched on it a little earlier. Does it surprise you, or did it surprise you? How?
Well, no, to go back to what I was getting on earlier, you know, I don't think we realized how much the consumer of journalism wanted a say in it, but there was nowhere to say anything. There was no, you know, political talk shows didn't exist. You know, news talk shows didn't exist for callers. So, you know, all of a sudden, when we said, give us a call at 555-1111, you know, and you could call up and say, Gators suck, Seminoles suck, Jaguars suck, you know. People love that. They ought to fire this guy. They ought to hire this guy. I mean,
there's so many opinions out there, too.
Right, and there's so many people.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing ought to be a clue is when the Gators played in those days, they filled it up. When the Seminoles played, they filled it up. When the Jaguars got here, they filled it up. You know, the players had record crowds on the golf tour. We sold the First Coast, sold 1/3 of the tickets to Daytona, came out of the First Coast. So we had bukus of race fans. So they all got a chance to say Jeff Gordon is a sissy, you know, or Dale Jr. is the greatest guy in the world.
And he was voted that for year after year, wasn't
Right,
he?
well, right. So, you know, that's what I didn't quite realize. And when I got involved, I saw how much they wanted a voice. And then we saw it coming in other forms. Now you go to political talk shows. People are lined up to say, Trump stinks, Trump is great, you know.
Right.
Obama stinks, Obama's great.
But the consumers of broadcasting, they made it.
They wanted their voice, and we gave it to them in sports radio.
And you've been involved in it maybe some 28, 30 years, sports radio broadcast. How's it changed over from when you first started to now? How would you say, how has it changed?
The greatest change, and this is true throughout all of journalism, unfortunately, from my perspective, is we're all homers now. See, listen, I was on the air, and I like to think that in all the shows that I've done, radio and TV, all the columns that I've written, I never showed you my bias. That doesn't mean that I didn't write positive stories, a lot of positive stories, but I never wrote them with an agenda. No matter what my heart was doing, if the Tar Heels lost, I wrote what I thought was the best story of the day, or the best commentary.
That's how we were taught.
Right, that's how we were taught. It literally drives me crazy, and there's nothing I can do about it, and no one is more guiltier than anyone else. But when I hear the guys on the radio say, well, you know I'm a Gator, you know I'm a Seminole, go Jaguars, whether it's 1010, ESPN, Fox 1,
Right.
you know, you read the news stories. They're not news stories. Most of them are commentaries, you know. They offer their opinion.
Well, the national news has turned into that.
Oh, yeah.
On the cable.
No, I'm not just saying local.
Yeah.
Oh, it's happened everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, these cable news channels, you know before you ever tune it in, if you tune Fox, you're going to get a right-wing perspective. If you go CNN or MSNBC, you're going to get a left-wing. You shouldn't know that. You should tune it in. Give me the news. Having a commentator is fine. Let a commentator come in and give his point of view. Have one for both sides.
Right.
And then let me make up my mind. Let you convince me that you're right and not this guy.
Right.
But give me the news, and you say, well,
Yeah.
that's boring. Well, no, it's not.
An older guy that I know that I play knows I was in news. Every time I come there, he calls me fake news. I said, listen, for 39 years, I got both sides, went right down the middle, never expressed my opinion, and let you figure it out on your own, right?
Right. Well, I think that's what we're supposed to do. But again, everybody's guilty of that now.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm out here screaming in the desert, you know, if Lamm screams in the desert and no one hears him, did he make a sound? Well, no. But that drives me crazy. I don't care if I'm listening to you on the radio or TV. I don't care where you went to school, who your favorite team is. I want to know what happened. And if there was something controversial, I want to be able to respect you enough to think you're going to give an unbiased. Whether I agree with your opinion or not is not the issue. I want to believe that you're unbiased when you gave it. I'll admit, there's so many things. I listen now, regardless of what it is, and I tune them out because somebody that I know is a Seminole will come on and say, I got some Seminole news for you. Well, he's not going to give me any bad Seminole news.
Right.
Because he's already made it clear he's a Seminole.
Right.
So I can't trust him for being honest. Same is true with the guy that says I'm a Gator or I'm a Nittany Lion.
Right.
If you establish where your heart is, then don't start preaching to me.
Right.
You've already told me what you believe.
You were part of the community in Jackson for many years as a sports writer, as a sports broadcaster, and that was a big part of the community and all. But how was Jacksonville? And you wanted to stay here, and a lot of people that I talked to in doing these interviews, the same thing. How's Jacksonville changed over the years? How would you describe the town from when you came here till now?
Well, I mean, physically, it's not the same town. I mean, J. Turner Butler wasn't there. 295 wasn't there. I mean, you know, I can go on and on and on. You know, there was actually some trees between Jacksonville and Orange Park.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just buildings. So it's boomed. I mean, we're now the 11th most populous state in the country. Now, that's just within the city limits.
Yeah.
We know we're not bigger than Miami Metro or Atlanta Metro, but we're bigger than Miami and Atlanta population-wise, just for the city. So it's grown unbelievably from that standpoint. I think it's become, we used to say it's nothing but a South Georgia town. Well, that's not the case anymore. We've become a melting pot. Listen, one reason the Jaguars came here, and I remember being told this by somebody at the NFL office, when they awarded us a franchise and shocked a lot of people around the country, he said, the owners agree that Jacksonville probably isn't ready for a franchise. But here we are looking at a Sun Belt boom city, and we're trying to project it 25 years down the road to now, which is 25. How could we not go there? Rather, you know, we look at other cities. Buffalo has shrunk in half since the Jaguars came on board. You know, Pittsburgh hasn't, they've shrunk. Detroit shrunk. Cincinnati shrunk. People have migrated south, better weather, more jobs at that time. So if you looked far-ranging, it was a no-brainer you give Jacksonville a franchise. At the time, it was a big shock. But I was told that, I saw that, I had that vision. I've been wrong about a lot of things. I didn't think football would be a major sport in the year 2000 because of the violence and it's no fun to practice. I was wrong. And there's a bunch of other ones I've been wrong.
Talk about the impact of the Jaguars. I mean, in this town and just over the years, you've covered them, and that just had to be the greatest thing for you in the spot that you were in, for the Jaguars to come here.
That was one of the few times where I threw my objectivity out the window because I was talking about an entire city and what was good for it. Whether you were a Gator or a Knoll or a Bulldog, you know, whether you cheered for the Dolphins or the Bucks from afar. I remember being on the table, imagine how long ago that was, drinking a pitcher of beer out of the pitcher. I think Channel 4 was there because they had it on TV. You know, NFL! You know, that's one of the few times in my career that I went overboard and giddy. But I didn't do it without thinking. I said, this is the time to do it. If you're ever going to do it, you know, you do it when you get an NFL franchise, your city does, or you get a Super Bowl, or if we got the National College Football Championship game. Those are the times, because I can't imagine anything bad for anyone in the metro area about those things. So, what am I going to come on? Yeah, we shouldn't have gotten that championship game. That would be stupid and wrong on my part. The Jaguars' influence is, first of all, people don't say nearly as much as Jacksonville, where, who, what, because it's an NFL city. It's only 31 of them, 30 of them, and they're known. And so you automatically identify with Jacksonville. Well, that eventually helps draw some business. You're getting ready to relocate your business. Well, I want to go somewhere where the employees will have a pretty good quality of life. What can they do? Oh, there's an NFL team there. That's a good start. You'd want a good, probably a symphony orchestra. Oh, they've got a nice one of those. They've got a good bunch of plays that come to the, town, Times Union Town Center. But look at the quality restaurants. That's another area. When I was first here, a quality restaurant, the old joke is Waffle House. Well, that may have been true then. That's certainly not true now. No, right. What are there? When you come to premium steakhouses, I'm talking about where you pay $50 for a steak and nothing else, by the way. We've got 7 or 8 of those now, 8, maybe 9. That's the Ruth's Chris, the Morton's, Three Forks, the Capitol Grill. So I see all of that happening. And
can you imagine what the impact would be in Jacksonville and for sports broadcasting if the Jags were to make it to a Super Bowl?
Oh, it would be tremendous, but I don't know that it would be any more tremendous than almost any city. Outside of maybe New York and L.A., I think that the Super Bowl would have just a huge impact. Of all the Super Bowls I've covered, I can tell you right now, the only one where you go, do they know there's a Super Bowl in town? Is Los Angeles. And the reason for that is it's so spread. I remember one of the ones I went to, one team was like 50 miles south, headquartered. The other was like 40 miles north, 90 miles. Imagine when they came here, if you said, yeah, we're going to headquarter one team in in Daytona Beach. Oh, is Jacksonville too small to have hotels? But so when you get out there, it's so spread. By the way, here's a little thing I want to get off my chest. LA's got to have an NFL franchise. Oh, people, the NFL seems so distraught. The media was so distraught. So they get not only one, but 2. You seen the crowds? There were more 49ers at the Rams home game. The Rams, Super Bowl last year. So it's not about winning. The Chargers are playing in a small college stadium. They can't fill it up unless the visitors fill it up, and they usually do. No local people are going to their games. Right. When they didn't have a franchise, I remember talking to associates and friends out there, said, we don't want an NFL team. We like the fact that every NFL broadcast is shown here. We can get every game. We can sit at home, go to our sports bar, and we can watch every team. You bring us a team, and then all of a sudden they got to show that team. You can't see anybody else. I never got the feeling they wanted one, and I think they've made a pretty good case they don't want one. But we're getting off topic. We're supposed to be talking about me. Sorry. I told you if you ask questions, I could go forever.
No. We're about to wrap up here, but if you were to talk to advice to young people that wanted to get in, wanted to get into newspaper business, it'd be a sports writer, you were that, and wanted to be a broadcaster and sports radio like you are, what would you tell them?
I would tell them if you get offered a newspaper job, run, because the newspaper, they're dying. You look at what the local paper looks like now. I could even jump over, the local paper, even when it's balled up because it's about that thick. But it's not just a Jacksonville problem. The papers in almost every city. We saw the cable killed the afternoon papers. When cable came in the 70s, all of a sudden the afternoon papers, and every town had one, started dying. Because you could get your news on cable that was too late for the morning paper. You didn't have to wait for the afternoon paper. Then the internet comes along, and it just takes a huge hit, you know, on not only newspapers, but radio. You don't have to wait to listen to the show to find out. Everything's on the internet. And then social media's come along, and in a few years, social media and streaming, two things that I know absolutely nothing about, but I'll guarantee you, they will be the dominant forces in media, how you get it. Social media, you go to streaming, cable will suffer, talk radio, sports radio will suffer, or radio will suffer. TV will suffer. You know, you now watch TV on your phone or something.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
To me, at 74, I'm going, that's crazy. That's stupid. And I still don't know how to do a lot of those things. If I were younger, I would make myself learn because it's important to function in today's world. At my age,
Right.
I'll let it go. I'm too old to try to learn some new tricks.
But no regrets that you ended up being in broadcasting in Jacksonville.
Oh,
No
no.
regrets.
Listen, I used to get some criticism because I wouldn't hire an agent. Number one, I just couldn't imagine myself having an agent, somebody representing me. You know, I'll represent me. I know I'm the best representation of me because I know everything that's important to me. But I guess the world evolved to the point where if you didn't have an agent out selling you and making contacts, you know, and I had a few snibbles about being able to leave. I did tell somebody one time, I was sitting in my office at home and they were talking to me about the possibility of going to this city. And I said, excuse me a minute, can you see dogwoods blooming outside your window? And he went, what? I said, can you see dogwoods blooming outside your window? Well, no, it was probably, I don't know when it was, but it was chilly up there. I said, well, I'm sitting here looking at this beautiful dogwood tree right outside my window. I think I'll stay.
Well, David, I thank you for staying. Thank you for coming out today, and you were always connected. You seem to know everything over the years. And
Yeah, don't ask
really
me
know
another
what to
question.
do.
I'll go
Right,
on
we
forever.
won't. I don't think we have any more time, but thank you so much for being with us today.
Mike, thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. And I've had a wonderful life. I love Jacksonville. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
All righty.
I
That worked.
Well, I'm afraid I overtalked.
No, that's good. Dynamite.